Northern Beaches Council would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of these lands on which we gather, the Gayamargal and Garigal people, and show our respect to elders past and present and other Aboriginal people here today. Thank you for your interest in Northern Beaches Council's Community Grants program. We run several different grant programs that vary in focus, and this video is intended to give general application advice rather than focus on one specific grant. The aim of all the videos on the Grant Resources page on Council's website is to help you draft a strong application and to answer some of the most frequently asked questions we get when people decide to make a grant application. You will find additional resources and information on our Grants Resources webpage, and we encourage you to have a look at these before starting your grant application. Many of our grants at Northern Beaches Council require applicants to be an incorporated organisation. So, what does it mean to be incorporated? Incorporation gives a group its own legal entity, separate from its members, which limits liability for these members. Incorporated associations follow a particular structure, with group rules, known as a constitution, plus a governing body called a board or committee. Legal duties are attached to the people who are on this board or committee of management. Incorporation allows the group to enter into contracts, sign a lease, employ people, and sue and be sued. It also allows the group to continue regardless of changes to membership. Incorporated groups or associations are incorporated under law and report to a regulator, which in New South Wales is New South Wales Fair Trading. Often community grant programs will require applicants to be an incorporated entity, and you will be required to prove this by providing a valid incorporation number as part of your application. But it is worth noting that some council grants do allow for individuals or unincorporated groups to apply. So always check the grant guidance document first to determine your eligibility. If incorporation is required and you are an individual or a group that is not incorporated, it may still be possible for you to apply for a grant if you form what is called an auspice relationship. This means you can rely on another incorporated organisation to receive and administer the grant funds on your organisation's behalf. The group or person wanting to apply for the grant and requiring support is known as the auspicee, and the incorporated organisation that supports or auspices the group is known as the auspicor. The first step in identifying appropriate auspices is to consider the project you are planning to do with the grant funding and whether it aligns with an organisation's purposes. The project needs to fall within the purposes of the auspicer organisation's constitution and must not be prohibited or limited. You should ask to see a copy of the potential auspicer's constitution to assess their suitability. You can also look up the constitutions of charities on the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission Register. Following the identification of an appropriate incorporated auspicer, the auspicing parties will need to consider the terms of their arrangement and relationship. From your perspective, an auspicing agreement is essential to ensure you have legal rights to access and use the funds which are granted to the auspicer by a council if you are successful in your grant application. In negotiating an auspicing agreement, you will need to ensure that the control you require over the project is clearly documented and ensure that you are able to comply with all the obligations which are proposed in the auspicing agreement. Ideally, you should be seeking legal advice before entering into an auspicing agreement to ensure you understand its full meaning and the impact of its terms. The assessment section of the Northern Beaches Council's grant guidelines lists the outcomes which successful grant projects should be able to demonstrate the support of. How should you go about choosing which outcome or goal to support? From the time you start to consider making a grant application, you should think about how your project aligns with Council's Community Strategic Plan, grant objectives, and any other strategic plans unique to the grant stream you are applying for. There will be links to these documents in the scope of the grant program section of the grant guidelines, and all Council strategic documents sit on the Council's website so that you can find out all the information you need. These strategic plans will allow you to understand what Council cares about, what we want to achieve, and what we expect from any projects that we fund. It will allow you to identify our pain points, challenges, and opportunities. Considering this, you should ask yourself the following questions to help you define the priority or priorities that your project aligns to. How does your project address a problem that Council has? Can the project fill a gap that exists? How will the project create a positive change? What are the expected results from the project? Who will be the beneficiaries of the project? Thinking about these questions in conjunction with the Council's strategic documents should help to clarify which outcomes to choose in your application and allow you to frame your application to Council's needs and interests. While a formal structure of assessment criteria exists for all grant applications, as detailed in the grant guidelines documents, if your grant project involves working with children and young people, there is extra paperwork you will be asked to provide. You must provide a copy of the organisation's child protection policy as part of your application. If you do not have a formal policy, you must be able to articulate how you intend to demonstrate commitment to the safety and welfare of children and young people, minimise the risk of abuse, misconduct and misuse of positional power, inform all staff and volunteers of their obligations and responsibilities in keeping children safe. These things should also be considered in relation to all vulnerable people who may be at risk of abuse, neglect or exploitation. Please see the grant guidelines documents for further details. One of the key things that you will need to do if your project does involve working with children and young people is to ensure that all those who do child-related work, including voluntary work, obtains a Working with Children check. Child-related work is classified as providing services for children and young people under 18, where the work normally involves being face-to-face with children, where contact with children is more than incidental to the work. Further information about applying for a Working with Children check, access to child-safe policy templates, and more information on what defines child protection can be found on the Office of Children's Guardian website. If you are successful in getting your project funded through Northern Beaches Council's grant program, all grant recipients are required to acknowledge Council in promotional material relating to the funded project. This includes printed material, research reports, online media, and media releases. Council will supply successful applicants with the Council's logo in various formats and guidelines for its use. Applicants must forward all draft artwork prior to publication to review and ensure compliance with Council's branding requirements. This brings us to the end of this guidance video. We hope you have found it useful. On the Grant Resources page of the Northern Beaches Council website, you will also find videos and presentations covering budget preparation, understanding outcomes and outputs, and acquittals. Our Grant Guru tool, Grants Hub, which is an online service to help you access opportunities Australia-wide, a link to a Smarty Grants help guide and frequently asked questions for applicants, a table illustrating Northern Beaches Council's grant offerings, a grants application checklist to help ensure you have completed all steps in the process. You will find the grant guidelines and Smarty Grants application form for each grant program on the grants page of the Council website. We look forward to receiving your applications soon.